The Ice Queen's Secret. Once upon a time, in a faraway land where winter reigned all year long, there existed a kingdom blanketed in snow, with towering glaciers as its walls and frozen rivers as its roads. At the heart of this eternal winter stood the palace of the Ice Queen Freya. Her castle was a breathtaking sight, made entirely of shimmering ice that caught the pale sunlight, casting rainbows across the kingdom. Freya, however, was rarely seen by her people. She lived in isolation, a figure of mystery and awe, for it was said that her powers were what kept the kingdom frozen in perpetual winter. Freya had ruled for centuries, never aging, her heart as cold as the ice that surrounded her. She was feared and respected, for the winter never left, and neither did she. The people whispered that her icy heart held a great secret, one that she guarded fiercely. No one knew what this secret was, but they all understood that as long as the Ice Queen remained cold and distant, their kingdom would stay frozen, locked in a never-ending cycle of snow and ice. But while the people of the kingdom accepted their fate, Freya felt the weight of her solitude. Night after night, she stood at her balcony, gazing out over the frozen wasteland, watching the auroras flicker and dance across the sky. She could feel the loneliness in her heart, though she never allowed it to surface, for fear that it would crack the ice within her. Freya had long forgotten what warmth felt like, what it meant to smile or feel the sun on her skin. Her power, her curse, kept her bound to the ice. One day, far from the Ice Queen's castle, in a village nestled in the kingdom's snowy valleys, a young adventurer named Finn was preparing for the greatest journey of his life. Finn had grown up hearing stories of the Ice Queen and her palace made of eternal frost. It was said that no one who ventured too close ever returned, but Finn had always been curious, driven by a desire to see things no one else had seen. He wanted to understand the legend, to know what lay beyond the endless snow and ice. Armed with nothing more than his determination and a thick fur cloak, Finn set out on his journey. He traveled for days, braving the bitter winds and treacherous ice fields. The cold gnawed at his bones, but he pressed on, driven by an inner warmth that refused to let him give up. As he journeyed deeper into the frozen wilderness, he encountered strange and wondrous sights. Crystal forests made of ice, frozen waterfalls that glittered like diamonds in the weak winter sun, and animals that moved silently across the snow, their breath visible in the frigid air. At last, after many days of travel, Finn reached the base of the mountain where the Ice Queen's palace stood. He looked up, his breath catching in his throat. The palace was more magnificent than he had ever imagined, its towering spires reaching into the sky, the ice walls glowing with an otherworldly light. As he approached, the air grew colder, and he could feel a strange pull, as if the palace itself was drawing him in. When Finn arrived at the gates, they opened before him with a soft creak, as if the palace had been expecting him. He stepped inside and was immediately struck by the silence. The air was still, and his footsteps echoed softly off the ice walls. He wandered through the grand halls, each more beautiful and more desolate than the last, until finally, he found himself in a vast throne room. At the far end, sitting on a throne carved from a single block of ice, was the Ice Queen herself. Freya gazed at Finn with eyes as cold and clear as ice. She had sensed his arrival long before he had reached her palace, for nothing happened in her kingdom without her knowing. Yet there was something different about this traveler. Unlike others who had come before him, Finn did not approach her with fear or reverence. Instead, he looked at her with curiosity and something else, warmth. Why have you come? Freya's voice echoed through the throne room, cold and distant. I came to see the Ice Queen's kingdom, Finn replied, his voice steady. To see the beauty of the ice and snow, and to understand the legend of the queen who keeps it frozen. Freya studied him in silence. There was something unsettling about the way he spoke, as if he were not afraid of her or her power. She had grown used to people fearing her, respecting her distance. But Finn seemed unaffected by the cold that radiated from her. The ice must remain, Freya said, her voice softer now. If it melts, everything I have built will disappear. The kingdom, my palace, even myself. But is a kingdom made of ice truly a kingdom at all? Finn asked, stepping closer. A place where no one dares to live near, where the cold keeps people apart. Freya felt a stir in her chest, something she hadn't felt in centuries. She frowned, pushing the feeling away. You do not understand. This is the way it must be. If my heart thaws, the entire kingdom will collapse. The ice holds everything together. Finn gazed at her, unflinching. Perhaps it's time to let the ice melt. Maybe your kingdom is meant to grow beyond the snow. Freya wanted to dismiss his words, to send him away as she had done with all the others who had come before him. But as she looked into his eyes, she felt the warmth of his presence reaching out to her, like the sun breaking through clouds. And for the first time in centuries she hesitated. The ice around them began to crack, the palace groaning as the temperature began to rise. Freya clutched her chest, feeling the ice within her heart begin to melt. She was terrified. She had always believed that her power was tied to the ice, that if she allowed herself to feel warmth, everything she had built would be destroyed. But Finn stepped closer, gently taking her hand. You don't have to be alone anymore, Freya. At his touch, the last remnants of ice around her heart melted away, and Freya gasped as warmth flooded her being. The palace shook as the ice began to melt, water trickling down the walls. Freya expected everything to collapse, for the kingdom to be destroyed as she had always feared. But instead something miraculous happened. As the ice melted, green fields and forests began to emerge from beneath the snow. Rivers that had been frozen for centuries began to flow, their waters sparkling in the sunlight. The people of the kingdom stepped out of their homes, astonished by the transformation. For the first time in their lives, they felt the warmth of the sun on their skin. Freya looked around in wonder. Her kingdom had not been destroyed. It had been reborn. The land that had once been cold and barren was now alive with color and warmth. And for the first time in her long life, Freya smiled. Finn stayed by her side, and together they ruled the kingdom, not as queen and traveler, but as partners who had brought life and warmth to a land that had been frozen for far too long. And so the Ice Queen's secret was revealed, that even the coldest hearts could thaw, and that sometimes, all it took was a little warmth to bring a kingdom back to life.